look at this and I say, okay, well, I didn't expect Jalen Hurts to be this good. I expected him to keep growing each and every game. I expected him to go to the run game and kind of be that running QB and be a little bit inaccurate at the passing, but he's blown me away, if I'm going to be honest with you.
Hopefully you're down at the Ocean Casino Resorts for the Eagles pre and post game tomorrow night. And maybe our next guest will be hanging out down there. Kayla Santiago, Demova Sports Director here on the Football Playbook, getting it in with the Phillies coverage. Kayla, not a Phillies fan, as you know, but I am a baseball fan. I've had some fun tuning in and checking out your Phillies coverage because talk about being in your element. That's your squad. You've got great knowledge. You're on location. I mean, it's probably hard for you to want to leave the stadium after you get done with work. So great to see you and putting on the miles these days, it looks like.
Yeah, absolutely. Great to see you too. I mean, it's been crazy. The stadium's absolutely electric, and just to be around it, you have Eagles fans everywhere too, chanting the Eagles chant as they always do since 2017. So it's been great to be a part of and great to cover it. Super long days, sleep is not happening at the moment, but hey, when you're covering the World Series, you don't really complain about many things.
Well, these are once in a lifetime moments. I mean, you're not going to find a city that basically has every pro and team in the city in the hunt, in contention, looking to win a chip. The New England, Boston went on a kind of little run about a decade ago with the Red Sox and the Patriots, and I think the Celtics even won. And so what a great time as the Eagles are here, 7-0, Kayla. I'll ask you the first question I asked to Glenn, just the last segment. I've got it. It's going to be a November to remember for the Philadelphia Eagles. I do not see them losing. That puts them at 11-0 heading into December, which the Steelers were at a couple seasons ago. At what point are you going to take going undefeated seriously? At what stage of the season will you say, you know what? I think we got a shot here.
Yeah, I think you look at the weeks with the Packers, the Titans, and the Giants, and although the Packers are not the Packers they normally are at all, I do think that's the toughest stretch. And I also think just because this division is so close right now the Giants did lose, and that helps out the Eagles a little bit. But that Giants game, I believe it's week 14, December 11, is going to be super crucial, I think, in terms of the NFC East division. So I think you get past those stretches of games, I think you're completely fine, and it's smooth sailing for the rest of the season, in my opinion. I think right there, you look at the Packers, the Packers might give you a tough run. You look at the Titans, okay, well, how long can they run the ball? And then you look at the Giants, a team who did beat the Ravens and who also did beat the Packers, that I think is going to be the toughest competitor on this schedule for the Philadelphia Eagles. I think you get past that stretch, and then I think you look at the Eagles are going to have home field advantage in the playoffs.
Not so fast, my friend. That Giants game, if they were to lose to the Giants, they got to come back around again in the final regular season game. And I think that could mean something only if they do drop that game to the Giants, because I don't think the Giants are going away. Giants would have to beat the Eagles in the first matchup to stay kind of in the mix for the division. But if they do, and the Eagles do drop one or two other games, well, that last game of the year could have division, playoff, home field implications. As funny as it sounds, nobody expected the New York Giants to be here. So if we have time, I'll ask you about who you think are contenders or pretenders. But let's talk about Jalen Hurts because, I just spent 30 minutes with Glenn Irby, Eagles Newswire, USA Today. Didn't even have a chance to get a Jalen Hurts question in. Now, he's an H-Town guy, grew up in Houston. He actually talked about his godfather was a ball boy or equipment guy or something for Houston. So he talked about being around guys like Andre Johnson and Vince Young being younger. But the way he's played, he's actually played better than a Vince Young, just as good as a Steve McNair, who he also brought up during his conversation. No Eagles quarterback has ever had 4 touchdown passes of 25 plus yards. And no Eagles team, not even the 2004, 2005 Eagles, No Eagles team in franchise history has ever started off 8-0 ever. Yet there's still people out there that want to say Jalen Hurts is not a franchise quarterback. Kayla, why the hate?
I think it's because that he's so young and that people just don't love Philadelphia. I also think you look at when Jalen Hurts was drafted, and I think at that point, the Eagles had Carson Wentz, and he was supposed to be the franchise guy. And then you draft Jalen Hurts, and everybody's kind of like, well, what the heck? Why aren't you getting Carson any help? You're drafting another quarterback. And I think people are saying that because they're a little bit worried of his performance this year is kind of like not as good, but it's kind of like Carson Wentz did in 2017, having that MVP season. Fingers crossed that he doesn't get hurt. But it's kind of like, hold the brakes. Will he be as good next year as he's putting on this performance? But in my opinion, I think it's completely different. I think you're looking at a Josh Allen situation here. I'm not saying talent level wise, but I'm saying you get this guy at number one receiver and it opens up so many doors for you now. And I think that's really all Jalen Hurts needed. He doesn't need a crazy amount of help. Now, this receiving core is extremely good, but you need a guy that's going to create. You need a guy that's going to put his head down and turn 10 yards into 20 yards. And that's what A.J. Brown does. And I think that completely changed Jalen Hurts' game into the better and made him trust the passing game a little bit more. And he's just grown because in my opinion, you look at this and I say, okay, well, I didn't expect Jalen Hurts to be this good. I expected him to keep growing each and every game. I expected him to go to the run game and kind of be that running QB and be a little bit inaccurate at the passing, but he's blown me away, if I'm going to be honest with you. And I think you have this core group of receivers. You have young receivers in Devonta Smith as well. He's absolutely a franchise guy to me at the moment. I think that you have to bank on Jalen Hurts this year. Unless he gets injured, that's another conversation that hopefully we don't have to have. But at the same time, I know the Eagles' schedule is quote-unquote not the toughest, but you're beating the bad teams and you're beating them by a lot, and that's what a good team does.
I say it all the time. You can only beat who's in front of you. Good teams take care of bad teams. They line them up and knock them down like dominoes. So while everybody else in the NFL is playing chess and checkers, Jalen Hurts is out here playing dominoes. And, he even said, born for the storm. This guy's full of one-liners. I just love the mentality. I like the comparison to Josh Allen, what you said, not from a talent perspective, but from like the rawness coming out. Josh Allen was raw coming out of Wyoming. Jalen Hurts, same deal. Like he ran a complex Oklahoma Sooner offense and, of course, Alabama with Brian Daboll. But you saw there was a lot of room for improvement. The accuracy, both in the short to intermediate game and the deep ball, was off. And that is a byproduct of another phrase I like to say, you can outwork talent. Hard work can defeat the more talented guy. Go look at the Arizona Cardinals. Kyler Murray, more physically talented, stronger arm, can do things Jalen can't, but I'll take Jalen Hurts all day long, right? And I would also agree with you with the addition of A.J. Brown. I remember the addition of Stephon Diggs for Josh Allen kind of took his game to the next level. Then they drafted a Gabriel Davis, who would be the Devonta Smith to Jalen Hurts. Like, I don't know. I mean, I think that this guy's the real deal. And Nick Sirianni calls him a cucumber. Like, I've never seen Jalen Hurts flustered, ever.
No, and I also have never seen anybody take accountability like he does. You hear a lot of people when they get to the podium after a loss or after not a good game statistically saying, well, I'll do better. And then it's kind of the same performance each and every week. Jalen Hurts is winning and he's still saying, I got to improve every single game. You heard him when I believe they were 5-0 saying, well, we have to focus on the next game. Who cares that we haven't lost a game yet? We still have a long season to go. I think he puts his money where his mouth is, in my opinion. And I have not seen that from a lot of quarterbacks, especially in Philadelphia. You look back in Carson Wentz, and not to talk bad about him, but it was a lot of, I got to get better. I got to do this. I got to do that. But it never really happened. For Jalen Hurts, you're completely right. You can tell that he is a football nerd through and through. He is going through the playbook. He is making sure that everything that he is doing gets improved each and every week. And I also think that he brings the chemistry and that morale up from everybody. And I think that really does matter. Now, winning's always going to make everybody happy, and winning's going to make a lot of people get along. You can't not look at that. But I do think with the guy that he is and the work ethic that he has, that just makes everybody else want to elevate their game.
Yeah, it's like Coach Sirianni says all the time. It's like he's the son of a football coach or something. But I mean, he is, and you saw that too. They were asked like during the bye week. I think Shane Steichen or Sirianni said like Jalen's like a coach on the field, so he got the cliff notes of the bye week evaluation that everybody did. They gave Jalen like the cliff notes version of it because he is the coach and the commander on the field, and he comes up with all these one-liners. I'm born for the storm. What else did he say? It's a business trip. I mean, he comes out with just some great lines. And I'll tell you what, he's going back to his hometown for Jalen. He's going to have fans there. He's going to have family there. And I think this, he mentioned that it was the most complete game that the Eagles played this past Sunday. Now, the offensive attack maybe wasn't as balanced in terms of being, because Sanders only got 8 or 9 carries, and I want to ask you about that in a second. But in terms of overall, from start to finish, all 4 quarters, do you agree that this was the Eagles' most impressive performance from start to finish?
Absolutely, because I've been saying it, all season long. The Eagles haven't really played a second half of the game yet. Now, they haven't had to, but you look at this Steelers game, and I think that everything was just working in their favor. They were composed. They were getting things going. And A.J. Brown and Jalen Hurts might be one of the best things that ever happens to Philadelphia for years to come, because watching them together and just watching how on cue they are, and A.J. Brown's able to create, like, I have not seen this in Philadelphia in a really, really long time. You're talking about a few years ago where guys can't even catch the ball. A.J. Brown is able to make something happen out of every single play. The trust is there. Jalen Hurts trusts his guy, and that makes his passing game even better. And I do think that's why they went to the air a little bit more. I just think that that's what was working. I think there's going to be games where you want the running attack a little bit more, but in this situation, the Steelers, not a great team. You look at Jalen Hurts and A.J. Brown, another chance for Hurts to get even more accurate in his passing game and to see what he can do. And that's just what was working this past week. And I think that, you look at the Eagles and you say, at this point of the season right now, yes, they're not playing great teams record-wise, but there's things they're improving on. They're playing full games, and that's only going to help them down the line, especially if they try to make that postseason push.
Another great point from Delmelver Sports Director Kayla Santiago here on the Football Playbook. It's hard to believe almost 20 years since McNabb and T.O. were in an Eagles uniform, but that's the type of things A.J. Brown and Jalen Hurts are doing. And you're right, 2 guys in the midst of their prime, mid-20s. You're right. Philadelphia is going to be treated to this tag team tandem for the next 5 years. And you wonder if Miles Sanders is going to be part of that offensive equation and trio, or however you want to phrase it, with Devonta and Goddard in the mix. But Sanders, another pending free agent. We saw a couple weeks back, he had a career-high 27 carries, under 10 carries on Sunday. Yet I look at this Houston Texans team that allowed 300 yards rushing in one game last week against the Tennessee Titans. It's hard to imagine 300 yards rushing in one game, but I would imagine, I thought it was going to be Devonta Smith's time to feast last week. Obviously, it was clearly A.J. Brown's day. I don't know. It could go back to the running game, though, on Thursday night and, get back to feeding Miles Sanders. It sounds like that's what they should do, at least. What do you think they will do?
I think they're going to run the ball, and I think that's what's so great about this Eagles team, because they can do whatever they need to do based on what their opposing defense is bringing them, right? So if you're like Miles Sanders cannot get through anything, the holes aren't there by the offensive line, all right, we're going to air it out. They have A.J. Brown. They have Devonta Smith. But now you look at the Texans and you say, all right, well, the rush defense is absolute garbage. We're just going to give the ball to Miles Sanders and let him have a field day because that's what he's going to do. Do they let Jalen Hurts run the ball more? Probably. I hope they don't. I also think this could be a game, too, for Devonta Smith that he can also get a little bit more. Now, with that being said, I think that the Eagles don't want to go away from kind of what they know, if that makes sense, right? So you look at A.J. Brown right now and you say, all right, maybe they should get Devonta Smith more involved, but what's working is working. All you hope now is that A.J. Brown or Jalen Hurts don't get injured and they're able to play the whole entire season, because Devonta Smith will be there and he'll be counted on for big plays at times, especially when you go into the playoffs and play those tougher secondaries. But at this point, what's working is working. And I think that's what happened last week. And I think this week you just go to what works. And in my opinion, that's going to be the run game. I mean, once again, you're facing not a very good rush defense. And I think Miles Sanders is going to want more carries. He's going to want the ball in his hands. But I love that Miles Sanders also isn't selfish. He's okay with getting crazy amount of carries one week and getting 10 carries the next week. And I think that's what makes this team so very good.
Well, it's a great way to preserve him because he hasn't been exactly the most durable guy throughout his career. Now, I think he did some stuff in the offseason, and Glenn mentioned that earlier last segment, that made him a little bit more stronger, more explosive, more durable, hopefully. Fingers crossed. We still have a half of the season to go. But flipping the script, going to the defensive side, the Eagles' run defense is going to take a hit here. Obviously, with Jordan Davis, you just don't replace a 350-pound mobile, agile monster in the middle of your defensive line unit. So how does Jonathan Gannon kind of tweak the defense? How is the personnel going to be used? Obviously, the M&M boys, Marlon and Milton, are going to see increased reps. Robert Quinn, thank God, helps kind of, I don't want to say alleviate the loss, but it softens it, it cushions it a little bit more. But you're talking about the interior defensive line. I thought we really were going to see the transition from Fletcher Cox to Jordan Davis, who had 19 reps in the first half before the injury. What do you make of the Jordan Davis injury, the impact, and what the defense looks like moving forward, Kayla?
We talked about it all season long, and one of the really good things about this defensive line was that they were able to have so many different guys that could fill in, and the depth was really there. And you look at Jordan Davis and Fletcher Cox, and I love Fletcher Cox, but he's later in his career at this point, right? And you look at that, there's not that much of a drop-off. Now with Jordan Davis being out, I think that there's a lot more of a drop-off in terms of who you're able to put in next, as you mentioned, whether it's Milton or Marlon at the same time. But I think that you look at this right now and you say, these guys have to step up, and that's what it's going to have to be. I do think that the defensive line is going to take a hit. I think the good thing is that you're playing the Texans this week, so I think that these guys are going to be able to get in there, get more reps. Will we see more of Fletcher Cox? Will he be able to play even more reps? I don't know, and I think that's where you look at and you're kind of worried just because of his age and where he's at in the stage of his career, and he's so used to that rotation all season long. So we talk about that durability. How is that really going to shape up without Jordan Davis? But I do think getting Robert Quinn is going to help, at least on the outside, of course, the defensive end. I was super excited about that pickup. I mentioned before that I really wanted somebody on the defensive side of the ball that they were able to get. And I just hope that he can kind of coach these guys up a little bit. And I hope that these guys sitting behind Fletcher Cox and Jordan Davis have just kind of been waiting for their turn. Kind of like Davis was earlier in the year. We mentioned more reps with Jordan Davis. We want to see him even more. Why isn't he getting more snaps? And then each and every week he was able to do that. And, you know, looking from a football standpoint, you just hope these guys are doing the same exact thing behind him. I think there's going to be a drop off, but like I said, I think it's a good thing they're playing the Texans this week because I think that they can get used to that rotation a little bit.
You transitioned beautifully into Robert Quinn there, because when he was acquired, I remember Brandon Graham saying to the media, like, yo, I can't wait to just learn from this guy. And Brandon Graham's been in the league 13 years. And Hassan Reddick was like, yeah, I'm not here to teach this guy nothing. I mean, he's one of the best in the business. And Reddick, you know, over the last 5 years, he's had one of the most sacks in the National Football League. But you're right, the leadership. And I don't know if you saw Roquan Smith of the Bears, who was informed of the trade while he was talking to the media as well. He was basically in tears when he found out the news. That's how much of the veteran leadership that Robert Quinn brings to the table. And Roquan would eventually be dealt to the Baltimore Ravens, which you probably didn't know. But I guess where I'm going with this, Kayla, is you mentioned Fletcher Cox, who he's not the same player that he was. He's still got gas left in the tank. I'm going to get ahead of ourselves a little bit here. It's so hard to envision any of these guys in another uniform, but the Eagles are going to have a lot of free agents after the year. Let's just say, let's fast forward. Philadelphia didn't even win the World Series yet, but let's say the Eagles win the Super Bowl. How many of these guys could possibly come back? You got Fletcher Cox, Brandon Graham, Lane Johnson, Jason Kelce. These guys have all been on the roster for over a decade, which is unheard of in the NFL. Over under 2. Is it even feasible to think that more than that could return next season, or are we going to kind of see a changing of the tide this offseason?
I think that we're going to have to see a changing of the tide just because where the money lies and just because of the youth that you have on this team. And you're kind of, honestly, at this point, you're entering a new decade a little bit. You're with Jalen Hurts, A.J. Brown. If they end up really paying Miles Sanders as well, that's another thing, that the Eagles are going to have to look at doing. But
Devonta Smith in 2 years as well is on.
Right. Exactly. So you can't put all this money into these guys. Now, in terms of being a lifelong fan and seeing these guys go, yeah, that's hard. But when you look at what you really need, it was kind of like the Malcolm Jenkins thing too, right? Malcolm Jenkins was such a key part of Philadelphia Eagles' success, but it was time to move on. And I think that's what we're going to see. Now, I honestly don't think, at least for Fletcher Cox, Brandon Graham, and Jason Kelce, that if their time is done with the Eagles, I think that they're done with football. I honestly don't see them playing in another jersey, especially Jason Kelce and Brandon Graham, because those guys have been talking about retiring for a little bit now. Now, when you look at Jason Kelce, I mean, he is so underrated to me, right? Because you look at the center position and you look how good that he's been every single year and how durable that he's been and the blocking ability that he has and just the leadership and personnel that he brings not only to this team, but the city of Philadelphia. I think that he's a guy that you're going to hurt losing. But we talked about this defensive line. We've talked about the depth. And, Jordan Davis hopefully is healthy and will be healthy enough to take over full time for Fletcher Cox. I think you can possibly see Brandon Graham retiring after this season. Also, Fletcher Cox. I don't know about Lane Johnson. Do they take a gamble on him? He's been injured almost every single year, I feel like it's at this point. And I do like Lane Johnson, and I think that he brings a lot to this team. But I also think that they're not going to put money in a guy that is constantly injured. So I think the only guy they possibly bring back, in my opinion, if he doesn't want to retire, is Jason Kelce, just because he has proven each and every year that he can stay healthy and that he doesn't have a drop-off, really, in my opinion. I mean, he has been so good for this Eagles team.
Yeah, Kelce can still do it. And I don't know if he is healthy because that ankle, he kind of joked about it. Like, I've rolled my ankle so many times. The bad news is I'm banged up. The good news is when you do it so many times, it doesn't really impact me as much. So he's kind of learned to deal with it. But I think there's an outside possibility, though. Like, it's probably not likely, but there's a possibility all four retire and go out on top. And wouldn't that be a hell of a celebration down the road to come back and honor all those guys if that does happen? But let me talk about some old faces and new places because the trade deadline was just yesterday. Some surprising moves. Calvin Ridley was moved. He goes to the Jaguars. We talked about Roquan Smith. The Cowboys picked up Jonathan Hankins right before the Robert Quinn deal. And then the Vikings, I wanted to ask you about, are they contenders? Are they pretenders? They pick up TJ Hawkinson. This one was surprising just from, it's rare you see the Lions and the Vikings make a deal in division, right? And here the Lions are basically helping the Vikings because Irv Smith, it was reported, I think, is going to be out probably for the rest of the season, 6 to 8 weeks. Lions offer up a pretty good replacement. You throw him into the fold with Thielen and Jefferson. I told Glenn, I said, I wasn't that impressed when I saw the Vikings in week 2, but they went off and rattled all 5 wins in a row. Good chance we could see them down the line. How much stock are you putting into this Minnesota Vikings team?
In my opinion, I think the Vikings' success completely relies on Kirk Cousins. And that might sound a little bit crazy, but they have so many weapons and they have guys that are going to do so well. And you look at their division too, they easily can win that division. I mean, there's no doubt. You look at the Packers, the Bears, and the Lions. I mean, come on now. You're not really competing with anybody right there. Now, you take a look up and down at their schedule, it might be a little bit tougher than the Eagles to round out the year for the Vikings, but I think they have that division, and I think it's going to be another exciting playoff if the Eagles and Vikings meet in the postseason. We saw it in 2017. Of course, we hope it's the same outcome as 2017, but I think, when you talk about the Vikings and the Eagles, I think the Eagles have a better chance just because of that defensive front and just because they can pressure the QB so much. And once again, they have great weapons. And I like that pickup as a football fan, like just watching the game and seeing, wow, like this Vikings team can really compete. I just think it relies on their quarterback. Can their quarterback stay consistent? Can they get them the ball? Can he be able to scramble out of tough defensive fronts?
Now you hit the nail on the head there. Good move. Questionable play at quarterback. We'll see how it pans out. Anything else that caught your attention? A lot of wide receivers on the move. We mentioned Ridley to the Jaguars, Chase Claypool to the Bears, which was kind of weird. I like Kadarius Toney to the Chiefs. I think that could have the most upside. And then the Dolphins added Bradley Chubb and Jeff Wilson from San Fran. So I thought they really helped out their squad. Any other thoughts or comments in terms of the NFL trade deadline, which was the most active trade deadline of all time, by the way?
Yeah, I just remember preparing for this Phillies World Series and kind of like what we're trying to do for our live shots. And it's like NFL update, NFL update, NFL update. I'm like, what is happening right now? And I agree with you. I do like Kadarius Toney a lot. I think actually when I did the draft with you, that was the year that he was drafted and he had a lot of upside. And I thought that he wasn't used properly. And I think now going to the Chiefs with Patrick Mahomes, he can really show what he has. And I think that he's going to get a lot more touches. I think he's going to be involved in the game plan a lot more, and I think going throughout the year, it's still early in the season. You're about midway through the year, and I think that they can utilize him in the way that he's supposed to. Chase Claypool, I mean, I don't know. Maybe it'll help out Justin Fields. Watching the Bears, I kind of just put my hands over my head, and I'm like, this guy needs so much help. I don't think Chase Claypool is the answer, but you never know. Maybe it can be that 1-2 punch for Justin Fields, and maybe he can get a little bit more accurate and a little better this year. I wasn't opposed too much to that trade. I think that they're just trying to move parts a little bit. But I would say Kadarius Toney, honestly, besides the Eagles trade, of course, was one of my favorites to see what he can do, especially with a really good quarterback system there.
It's exciting because, Andy Reid is going to tap into that potential. If anybody's going to max out the potential, it's Andy Reid. All right, two last ones for you, Kayla. I'm going to get a score prediction and final outcome for the Texans-Eagles matchup. But before we get there, a lot of Philadelphia fans tuned in, especially to the World Series. I know you're doing the Phillies coverage. You are the sports director for Delmarva Sports. Tell the good listening audience at home where you're going to be, where they can find you, what you have on deck, all the exciting stuff happening at Delmarva Sports.
Yeah, I mean, we'll be covering the World Series until Thursday and obviously hoping that they win it on Thursday, and we'll be in the streets live at 5 a.m. if they do with all the fans. We go live from 5 p.m. to 1 a.m. If you follow me on Twitter at Kayla_Santiago1, I can put those links up there on where you can kind of find me. We're in the thick of high school football season as well. So it's been a little bit crazy right now. We have the World Series, but we're also in Maryland playoffs at the moment. So we've been back and forth with everything. And, if there's a parade, we'll also be there on Broad Street. So we'll be covering that as well. And, if the Eagles end up going far too, we'll be at the Super Bowl. So, there's a lot of really good things going on right now. The World Series coverage, I think, at the moment is, what we're focusing on just because it is in real time. And it's been really cool to be around it and kind of a lifelong dream. And last time I was rooting for the Phillies in the World Series, I was 9 years old. So it's kind of crazy how the tables turn. But that's what I've been doing so far. And, high school playoffs are definitely taking a turn as well and amping up a little bit in Delmarva.
No, good deal. I have to admit, I don't watch every second of the World Series. I rely on you to get my updates when I do. And I'll tell you what, I will make this proclamation. If there is a World Series down there at Broad Street, I'll be down there to celebrate. And
there we go.
So maybe you can do an interview with me. I'll be down there with all the hooligans of Philadelphia. Now, we'll get you out of here on this. Philadelphia 14-point favorites a week ago. Maybe 14-point favorites again next week, but 14-point favorites tomorrow night. Who you got? What you got? I know who you got. How badly of a beatdown is it going to be, I guess, is the question.
35-14. I think that the Eagles are just going to run the offense up. I think the run game is going to have a field day. I think you're going to see a little bit more of Watkins, a little bit more of Devonta Smith. I mean, listen, the city's already crazy with the Houston-Philadelphia, but now that there's a Thursday night game for the Eagles and a possibility for the Phillies, if they win tonight, to win the World Series on Thursday night, the city might burn down. I don't really know what's going to happen, but I think 35-14, the Eagles win, and they just keep on going. They keep this undefeated streak alive, and I think you're going to see a lot of good things. You're going to see that defensive rotation a little bit, see what they kind of have to offer, and the Eagles are just going to have a field day out there, in my opinion, offensively.
Oh, man, all hell is going to break loose if they win Eagles and Phillies on the same night.
Yeah.
Man, it'll be a great week to start the football weekend, because then Eagles fans get to just enjoy an NFL Sunday with nothing but a smile from ear to ear. And hopefully when we come back here next Wednesday, Kayla, you're still grinning and happy and celebrating the Eagles. And, hey, we always appreciate the time. I know you're very busy doing great things, and we'll continue to count down the Philadelphia Eagles undefeated season. We'll see if we can keep it rolling, keep the momentum flowing, and we'll see you next week.
Hopefully. Go Birds. Thank you guys so much.